and every Friday we have Free Speech Friday. We get two free-thinking, free-speaking individuals. This is brought to you by the Free Speech Union. Search fsu.nz. We had Peter Boghossian brought here by the FSU on the show earlier this week, and we got a massive reaction to him. The Free Speech Union are your champions for free speech in this country. If you've got a problem with free speech or you want to support it, fsu.nz is the place to go. Free speeches this morning. I must come up for a better word than that. My old mate Leo Molloy checking in from HQ2 in Auckland. How are you, Leo?
I'm very well, thank you, Sean. What about you, mate?
Excellent. And from the People's Republic of Dunedin, my old colleague and Rye Observer of the World, Mark Champion. How are you, champs?
Well, it's the Socialist Republic, Sean.
Oh, no, the Socialist Republic of Dunedin, that's right. All right, guys. Look, what I want to get into first, and I know that you know him, Leo, and I know him. Not sure you have ever met him. And I wouldn't agree with everything that he says or does, but Brian Tamaki is saying, I am going the Herald. I want to ask you, Mark, as someone with huge journalistic experience, did you read that coverage from the Herald about the sex offender and the way it was worded and presented?
Yeah, of course. And I think someone is trying to paint Tamaki into a corner. And I've thought a lot about who it might be, and I think it might come back to the good Maori, bad Maori distinctions that we're seeing, and popular movements. And you've got to say that Tamaki is a popular movement out of step with other Maori popular movements. And so that's where I've ended up on that debate.
There's a kind of political aspect. He also suggested yesterday that the police might just be butthurt because they had Ron Mansfield argue them to a standstill, Leo, and they had to drop those charges against Brian for holding that rally during COVID. Do you think it's payback, Leo?
I think there's definitely an element to that. Having had a look at the notes on the case overnight and what people are saying, and I did reach out to Hannah Tamaki, who I consider to be a friend, and said, can you give me your version of events? And she's very much arrived at that conclusion. Her last two paragraphs in her text reply to me told the police media team gave the Herald that story, which we are now investigating why they gave a twisted chain of events. That would reconcile with some patterns of behaviour that we're seeing in police here at the moment.
Yeah.
Not across the entire force. Some of the police are very well-rounded and very well-balanced, but there's an element amongst the police up in College Hill who are not so pleasant. So I think you'll find that the Herald is working with the police on this one. And I don't know why they've got it in for Brian. I do. Mark's analysis was very succinct and very accurate, and I don't quite understand why people find Brian's behaviour so objectionable. I mean, I don't subscribe to his value systems. I don't subscribe to the leadership group that he's in charge of, but I respect his right to have an opinion, to do what he wants to do, and I can't see he's doing too much harm out there myself.
Yeah. Mark, would you agree that that series of stories in the Herald, the way it was headlined, the way they were constructed, suggested that this person who has admitted these offences against young men was in the inner sanctum, if you like, or formerly part of the power structure of Destiny's Church?
Yeah, I heard the interview with Brian, and you did as well as you could to nail that aspect down. And I don't think I was left with a clear view of where he sat in the church. But putting that aside, it was clearly a hit job from the Herald. And further to my first point, I think that every time TPM gets out and positions itself locally, Brian Tamaki responds in a similar way with similar activity. And I think that's where the rub is.
It's interesting, actually, that you've both made this comparison, that there is a battle, if you like, for the electoral or social power of, let's call them disaffected Maori, and I hate lumping people into groups. And they've got and it's funny because I always thought for a long time about Destiny. Where would I rather a young Maori man who's just got out of prison go, to a gang or to Destiny Church? And I generally come down on Destiny Church. But maybe that's what the real competition is for here, influence over that cohort of people in New Zealand.
Yeah. And look, I think we see it. consistently in Maori politics is that there is no ethos behind Maori politics in a particular way, owned by more than sort of one large group. It's very fractured. And I think we see that in many aspects of Maori politics.
All right. Okay, look, that actually segues quite nicely, guys, into the latest Roy Morgan poll. And it's a Roy Morgan poll, and any poll on its own is just a poll on its own, and they're only a sample of 1,000 people, so that we can say what we want about the poll. But there is no doubt that the Maori Party rating 9% when it was previously below 2% indicates that something is happening, Leo, and that whatever the taxpayer-funded strategy of John Tamahiri is, it's bloody working.
Yes, it is working, and I was intrigued by what you just said about the Destiny Church, and I want to come back to that if we can, please, at some stage. And the point that of interest to me is that you most often come down on the side of Brian Tamaki. Can you tell me which cases you come down on the side of the gangs?
I don't think gay people cause earthquakes, Leo, or natural disasters.
That's true, but what sort of person are you going to align with gangs who's trying to re-establish their place in society as distinct from aligning with Destiny?
Yeah, that's right. No, fair point. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Moving on. So the question was about what we took, that mad woman doing the bloody haka in Parliament. Yeah, it was quite interesting, wasn't it? Because I had a rendezvous with JT the day after here on the Thursday. We had Tony Alexander speaking over at the GC. And JT came along to that. I think JT may well have even contributed towards funding it. But he looked like, a normal, well-balanced, politician with a good perspective on life, tolerant of other people's views, which is how
And a $20 million operating profit for his charitable trust in the last financial year.
Yeah, it's quite a big number, isn't it? And I think JT's doing very well there. But I suppose, once again, that's his right. I mean, in the budget, I think he got an extra $2 million. He gets $300 million a year in the budget across those two entities from memory. So he did well, but I don't think he's done that well. He's not holding the whole country at ransom or doing something inappropriate with them, is he? Not that I know of, anyway.
Yeah. Mark, do you think that and I'm not going to say it's worrying or otherwise. I'm agnostic when it comes to politics. I report what happens. It would seem to me that the Maori Party has certainly increased its catchment and its awareness by practicing very, very radical posturing politics. And that changes the dynamic, particularly on the left with the Labour Party.
Yeah, all of that is true. But I come back to the fact that Kamala Harris spent $1.5 billion and still lost because the offering was unattractive. And by the time you piece together, what kind of coalition would you call it? You've got Labour, who are bleeding into that space, occupied by the Greens and Te Pāti Māori, and who personally stand for nothing because they can't even figure out whether they should have a capital gains tax based on the fact that we've already got one, which is called the Bright Line test.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to turn the world around. They still haven't figured out that they lost the last election because people didn't want what they were offering, and they've never acknowledged that.
And they didn't down in Christchurch last weekend, did they? They doubled down. No. They said, let's bring back Nanaia Mahuta.
Yeah, Nanaia Mahuta. I mean, goodness. I mean, you've got to wonder what their thinking is, because they just think that people will simply forget that they tried to entrench a piece of legislation aided by the Greens so that Maori could own the asset of water. And people figured it out, and they voted against them.
Look, I want to ask you Kirsten, me a very general question. And because I am a journalist, and because no matter how I try, I live inside a bubble, I consume way more media of all sorts than is healthy for any individual. I wonder how many people you guys know, normal people, are really obsessing about the Maori Party or political polls or all these nuances. Aren't most New Zealanders just trying the hell, Leo, to get on with their lives and make ends meet?
I think they are, and I had a look at the poll, because you mentioned, and Ben did in the preamble for this, that we should have an opinion about the polls, the results of the latest Roy Morgan poll, and I see it's the young females. There's no surprise there, is there? I know that Champo there just reflected on Kamala Harris's role and how she spent 1.5 billion and how she came undone. But she had strong support of the young female Liberals, didn't she? And I don't think they come to much. I think their contribution towards the voting group, the demographic, is not significant. They might well pick up the phone and talk to someone who's doing a poll of 800 people, and we might get all excited about Maori Party being on 9%. But the reality is that 9% is not significant when you're 1 year into your term.
Yeah.
And it won't be significant in 3 years or 2 years' time when we have the next election.
But Radio New Zealand and all the lefties on Twitter, Mark, tell me it is important. And TV1 tells me it's important, and Breakfast News and that nice woman with the tattoo tells me it's important.
There lies another issue, Sean. And I'd kind of love to talk about that because
really can. That's why it's Free Speech Friday, Mark.
I'm teed up for this one. Because what you've got is a poll which is driven by a narrative that is patently untrue, biased, and misleading. And so if your sources of information, as most people's would be, would be, online stuff, the sort of Herald, if you can be bothered paying for it, most people wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so you're left with Mikey Sherman, TVNZ, the Moku Party. You've got no choice but to suck that in. And like 1990, going back that far, that was a year of discontent, and it was driven by the PSA.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear
and you had marches down Wellington.
Yep.
People losing their job because of the bloated public service that Labor left.
Yeah.
And a recession. And so let's not take the recession out of this factor.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I hear you, Mark. Look, Leah, I just got a text in. And I just want to address it for you, and you can reply to it. Give it up, Leo. You're good mates with JT. But as you've already said, Leo, and what I love about you is you're also mates with Hana Tamaki, and you know them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if anyone listening says, oh, you want to accuse Leo of some bias, he's a hail fellow well met, and he's in hospital, and so he bloody should be. Guys, we will take a break, and when we come back, I think we might go Marsden funding and how diverse you have to be to clean a street.